Hi everyone. I know I just put out a video, specifically this video, Essay 11.25, my latest book is Live and Continuing Communism, where I critique Jesse Gender and revolutionary thought vis-a-vis my own book volume and the people that I normally work with while citing people such as them. However, there is something that I want to do today in furtherance of the same basic idea, which is synthesizing praxis through the daily habits that we cultivate within discourse more broadly. So discourse being among our friends, those that we watch, those that we consume, those that send us things to consume. So all of that being said, today's video is a short little react video that is in continuation of that same basic spirit, but it's a bit more spontaneous. I was sent some material by my partner, Bay Ryan. Bay is Indigenous and Maori. They are gender nonconforming, and they are disabled and neurodivergent. So they have a lot of different things going on where they are and where they live in New Zealand politically that jive with the work that I do. Dating. So we're partners, polyamorous partners. They have multiple partners. I have multiple partners. But they also are a co-editor and co-writer of my larger book series, the same book series of which this book volume just went live. And they are someone who sends me different things on a daily basis that help spark creative thought, nerd sniping, basically, where they're like, oh, I'll send this to Persephone and they'll think about it and they might respond to it. And that might not be what's always being done consciously, except I have told them repeatedly, hey, if you send me this, I'll probably write about it or respond to it. So keeping all of that in mind, Bay had sent me several things that I saw after doing this video promoting my book and responding to revolutionary thought and Jesse Gender. And the things that they sent me are things that I feel illustrate some different concepts that I want to put forwards. Specifically, they sent me something about Muslim trans people and indigenous cultures. And keeping both of those things in mind, I wanted to put a question to Lady Izdihar, who I've responded to before, and Yousef Abdul Hussein, who I've also responded to before, while also keeping in mind that intersectionality is a huge part of the work that I do. This video, the value in showing intersectional solidarity when combating fascism, where we combine a wide variety of things through daily discourse on multiple registers simultaneously, be it YouTube videos, essays, trash media, BDSM, and various other forms of content creation among myself and my friends, but other people that I consume and who consume other stuff back and forth, etc., etc. So this is something that I've been doing for a long time and want to continue doing now that I just released my next book volume, and I am inviting people that I consume and cite but don't know personally, Lady Izdihar and Yousef Abdul Hussein, to talk about something that I talk about myself on a regular basis, but I don't necessarily know their opinions. Keeping all of that in mind, what we'll do now is we'll watch the videos that my partner, Bay Ryan, a minority themselves, sent me as a part of my book series and as something of a extension or invitation to partake in discourse. I am inviting Izdihar and Yousef, who are both Muslims, though in the case of Yousef, I believe they are I want to say Yemen, but I could be wrong, and if I am, I apologize. All I know is that they are not from America, but they do consume American media, and they do have opinions about sex work and a particular way of appearing that I've critiqued before, re Orientalism and the Gothic, or mild criticism for an Arab ally who loves, hates Aladdin. Lady Izdihar is also Muslim and a Marxist-Leninist who, as far as I understand it, lives in the United States. So I am essentially asking two Muslim people in and out of America, one being an open communist and the other whose political affiliations I'm not entirely sure, but I am asking two different people who have certain things in common with themselves, certain things in common with me, but we're all a little bit different from each other. And as I watch these two videos, I will ask them afterwards to perhaps respond. So before we start, this video is from a trans woman, as far as I understand it, Transgender Law Center, a trans woman who's Muslim, who is discussing halal and haram, what is permissible and what is forbidden.
What does trans is halal mean?
Halal and haram are like very triggering words when you grow up Muslim. So many things are talked about as being haram, but a lot of the Muslims that I grew up around that were the most halal ever were doing all these haram things. I also was raised around a culture where I was seeing trans women all the time. Like when we went to Pakistan and it was my uncle's wedding, my first memory of trans people was being at that wedding and seeing a bunch of trans women dancing with my dad and my uncle and being like, who are these women and why am I so attracted to them? And then being told that being queer is haram, being trans is haram. And I was like, how do I make this in a really simple term that would obviously garner a lot of attention from people, because that is a very triggering statement to make for some reason.
So first and foremost, this person is discussing something that you also see in Western culture. So you have queerness is treated as alien, as sodomy, blood libel, witchcraft. It is basically what happens in our own culture, and through Orientalism for that matter, is something that happens in reverse or on the other side of the ocean in any event, where cultures that practice Islam first and foremost can also be queerphobic in ways that affect not just cis queer people, but also trans queer people. And there is a bigoted character to Islam that forbids queer things in a heteronormative way, very comparable to Christianity and Judaism, because they are all Abrahamic religions. They worship the same basic God, just with different names, different forms of dogma, different forms of sacred texts. But the same basic idea is there in terms of heteronormative dogma. And you see that in the Middle East, you see it in America and around the world, in all of these religions, which means that various tropes that occur are such that in the Gothic you may have the closeted priest, or the priest who is a sinner who doesn't practice what he preaches, e.g. Dimmesdale from the Scarlet Letter. You could just as easily have a Muslim counterpart that plays out in the same basic way, which this person is discussing. Some of the most halal people did some of the most haram things, and I'm not sure if they were meaning in good or bad faith, but the reality is that you have some people who are very sanctimonious, who don't practice what they preach, and there are some people in good faith who are very open about who they are as queer, and yet who are still Muslim. Point in fact, in the case of Lady Izdihar, as far as I understand it, they are bisexual. So if someone can be bisexual, why oh why can't they be trans? Continuing.
But also have some sort of sentimental memory, core memory with people that understand my culture and understand my background and my religion, to evoke some sort of emotional response to that, and to make people understand that they're not haram. You can't be haram. Your living cannot be haram. You accepting your identity as who you are, that God made you, cannot be haram. it can only be halal. Because I really believe that DJing, media that you put out, that I put out, is all part of brainwashing. If people keep saying the same thing over and over again, they believe it's the truth. And so even if it's just me dancing around and the clip goes viral and has nothing to do with transness, has nothing to do with like being Muslim, if they see that in the background, it's all part of brainwashing. And even if I'm gone tomorrow, those clips are still going to be spread around, and that message is still going to be there in every single video that gets floated around from that day. That message is going to be there. So whether they believe it's true or not, it's slowly starting to seep into their minds. Like, one of the things was that I found this speech that Queen Jean did, and she was talking about being the spiritual daughter of Marsha P. Johnson.
So before we get into this anecdote here, what they're essentially talking about is brainwashing or subliminal messaging, a Trojan horse, if you will, where you have a hidden message through allegory that you want to convey. And if you go all the way back to Plato's cave, you're going to see the state using shadows on the cave wall to brainwash people into essentially taking the blue pill as opposed to the red pill. But everything is dualistic. Everything is anisotropic, meaning that its function is determined by its direction, its flow of power. Does power flow up, or does power flow down? Up towards the state, down towards workers, states' rights versus worker rights. So in this particular instance, all's fair in love and war. Nelson Mandela would argue that you have to fight fire with fire. And in this particular case, all war, as Sun Tzu would say, is predicated on deception, what I call revolutionary cryptonomy, or the Gothic theory of cryptonomy's double operation to show and hide at the same time, the Trojan horse. Fascists would call this a dog whistle, but I guess the same basic idea is something that can be used by communists or people that communism adheres to and upholds through the activation of theory in ways that defend different minorities. Classically, through Lenin, queer people were protected and defended by the state, and the state later betrayed them after Lenin died. But Lenin's arguments upheld the idea that trans people are sacred, and furthermore, that various religions should be allowed to be practiced. Lady Izdihar talks about the Muslim religion as something that was actually guaranteed protections by the Soviet state, though I will add that the Soviet state at the same time took away protections for trans people, and homosexuals in particular, male or female, in the 1930s were persecuted across the entirety of the Soviet Union's existence, and they weren't decriminalized again until after the fall of the Soviet Union. And there are different things that you could say about that, and that queerness in that part of the world being decriminalized was basically an olive branch by the state, the Western state, which had destabilized the region, but the fact remains that the region had already criminalized queerness after decriminalizing it, so they were just constantly oscillating. So there were different bad actors on both sides of the fence as far as that goes. The Soviets mistreated queer people, but they also assigned protections to gender nonconforming people to a certain extent, and also to the rights of women and the rights of Muslim people as well. So these kinds of conversations are worth having, and furthermore, they're historically complex. There's a lot of different things going on, and that complexity continues through people such as the person in this video talking about being trans and halal, which isn't something that I'm intimately familiar with because I'm not Muslim, and neither, for that matter, is Bay, but is something to keep in mind when we talk about different cultures coming together, which this follow-up video will talk about. The point being is that we can have conversations and we can introduce ideas through allegory that are showing and hiding at the same time, which is the anecdote that this person is talking about in their video.
And I took that speech video and I made it so that way I could mix that Marsha P. Johnson into this song by Skepta, who's this UK artist. And he has this song, "We Need Some More Girls in Here." And I was like, I'm going to keep playing this at the straight party. Like, they're going to keep thinking that I'm playing a Skepta song. And then, like, right before the drop hits, she says, Marsha B. Johnson, Marsha B. Johnson. And then I switch it right back to the, we need some more girls in here. So if I play this at the straight clubs, which I have no idea who Marsha B. Johnson is, at least maybe that's like the seedling of conditioning for them to like maybe remember who that name is and maybe Google it one day. It's not going to change the world. It's one damn DJ set, you know?
This goes all the way back to Shakespeare and King Duncan and Macbeth. I have begun to plant you and put you full of growing. The idea that you can seed people with various ideas. In Shakespeare, in the church, seedlings, seed metaphors and planting. You see it in the Bible, you see it in politics, you see it in theater, and you see it on stage and off in situations like this that are kind of in between. It's a kayfabe, if you will. It's neither here nor there, but both. It's a form of liminal expression.
But change makers in this world don't do it all in one project or one day. It's like little seeds that they're putting into the world that I noticed that make like a bigger impact.
What Marx would call specters. So yeah, like this person is obviously in on the joke, but the joke is something that the humor involved is that, yeah, we're slowly transing you. If you gaze into the abyss also gazes into you. And this goes both ways. The abjection process is something to further or reverse, and furtherance to or resistance of state predation that occurs through a variety of registers, religious or otherwise, racial or otherwise. There's a lot of different things going on. So this was the first video. Now let's watch the second. Before we do, I just want to say this video is about the intersections of different cultures. I believe it is a Maori group that is going to meet different Indigenous groups. The Black Ferns 7 surprise welcome in Vancouver. So if I understand it, the Black Ferns are a musical group from New Zealand, and they are welcomed to Vancouver by the Musqueam people. So you have different Indigenous cultures, and alongside those cultures that are kind of synthesizing before the audience are unto themselves participants. So this is something that's made me think of this video that I had done previously, the value in showing intersectional solidarity, where you have a melting pot of different cultures that happen out in the streets and within academia, in YouTube essays, and through different forms of labor, paid and unpaid, sex work, care work, and the work of the intelligentsia in and out of academia. So something to keep in mind here as we watch this is that how these kinds of chance encounters happen all the time. And this one, again, was recommended to me by Bay, and now I'm recommending it to Lady Izdihar and Yousef, saying, hey, check this out. What are your thoughts on indigenous cultures? So in the case of Lady Izdihar and myself, I don't believe we would qualify as indigenous, but potentially, depending on where Yousef comes from, perhaps they might fall under that particular bailiwick. I don't know. Something to keep in mind as we watch this.
My dear friends and relatives, on behalf of our Musqueam people, we're so honored to be able to come and greet you.
The idea of a powwow in indigenous cultures, on Turtle Island in particular, at the very least, is that they are facing an ongoing struggle that they have been ensconced within for generations. And by doing this, they are breaking bread with people who could be potential allies, people that share the same struggle. They have more in common with people who are indigenous like themselves in ways where they invite other people who have more in common with them despite their differences. White people in America, for instance, are invited to attend powwows to partake of the culture and understand that the struggle is shared by indigenous peoples, even though white people aren't indigenous. white workers have more in common with Indigenous people than they do with the oppressor, with the ruling class.
Meet you here in the ways that our ancestors have. In the words of my ancestors, which means you are also very welcome here.
This isn't just kumbaya. This isn't just let's sit around a campfire and sing songs. The songs are a form of cryptonomy similar to trans as halal, where they have a hidden thing being communicated openly through the breaking of bread in good faith. It's something that outsiders who are mistrustful of these cultures might look at and discount as completely worthless, but then at the same time, those in on the know who realize that Indigenous people are not savage, they are human, and they are sharing their culture in ways that communicate a desire for punching up. Instead of red skin, white masks, you have the recognition of cunning recognition as something that they want to do away with corporate and state-provided representation, and to, through grassroots movements and dialogues such as these, communicate a intersectionally conscious form of class struggle that includes culture and race.
We're so happy to have you, and we all can't wait to see you on that pitch. Warrior still belongs in all of us, and that's the place we still live in. Light Septa for making this beautiful journey.
Just say what a huge honour it is to be welcomed onto your villa. We may be from different countries, but there's so many similarities between our cultures. To be welcomed with so much warmth and hospitality onto your land, onto where your ancestors came from. So from all of us here in the Black Ferns 7 to you all, our brothers and sisters, thank you so much for.
So again, it's an exchange where the way it is explained to me by Bay, who again is Mali, is you meet people where they are, and there is an exchange, a house that is the space of peace, and then there is the outside space, the space of war. And traditionally, the ritual would have a warrior approach with a spear, and they would have this gesture, this display, similar to a haka, but I don't believe they're identical, where they would basically ask through their performance, are you here for peace or for war? And then they would lay the spear on the ground. Someone would come and then pick it up, demonstrating a sign of respect to acknowledge through the ritual that they are acting in good faith. And then they are let into the home where they are allowed within the society where they can parlay. It's very similar to a powwow. And in this case, it's a powwow between different indigenous cultures where you have people who are not of those cultures in the same witch's cauldron, essentially. And as far as that goes, they are able to communicate in ways that rub off onto people in a very cryptonymic way, showing and hiding this or that, where a lot of the people watching don't necessarily realize what they're seeing. They're still in Plato's cave, if you will.
The love and warmth that you've given us.
So yeah, it's the kind of thing that you open hearts and minds through these kinds of exchanges that honestly, for all the academic de rigueur that I could assign them, at the end of the day, follow the same basic social practices and principles that you may encounter just in the day-to-day. This is on Facebook, which I barely use, but Bay uses it to recommend things to me through their own feed. They're more politically active on there, and they're able to recommend things to me that I'm not normally aware of just because I'm not on there. I'm not on Facebook, but also I'm not as in tune with Mali culture as they are. And they're able to send me all of these things that, having, co-written and co-edited my book series, not just a book volume, but a book series, 7 books thousands of images, exhibits, they are able to recommend things like this and like this that hit close to home in ways that can contribute to a larger conversation and keep the ball rolling, if you will. The party keeps on going, and keeping that in mind, to keep the party going, I am extending the opportunity in this case for Lady Izdihar and Yousef Abdul Hussein to comment on these two videos in regards to reiterate, what does it mean trans is halal? And how does that tie to class struggle in ways that also intersect with culture, with religion, with sex and gender, in ways that, as Judith Butler would say, stir up gender trouble, but also invite, as I would argue, an ability to parody and break various harmful binaries, stereotypes. These things are confronted in a space of confrontation, already Plato's cave, but also, as I would argue, Athena's aegis, the mirror shield. Also, not just in regards to trans, but indigenous cultures, which also intersect, they themselves are Maori and Irish, but also gender nonconforming. They're trans and they are disabled and on the spectrum, the neurodivergent spectrum. So there's a lot of different things going on there. And anything that happens here in this kind of exchange between the Black Ferns and the Musqueam people in Vancouver can also happen with trans people. It can happen with Muslims, bisexual Muslims, and it can happen with Muslims from the other part of the world that I'm responding to as a trans woman who is a Satanist. So I am, for all intents and purposes, not just agnostic, but seditiously apostatic in ways that invite a form of iconoclasm to open the minds of people like Yousef and Lady Izdihar. So all of that being said, this is just a React video. It was unscripted, and it's less me making any kind of like academic statement myself beyond what I've said many, many times in my book series vis-a-vis my partner, and more to invite people that I consume and cite, like Lady Izdihar and Yousef Abdul Hussein, to comment on things that Bay and I write about all the time, such as trans culture and indigenous cultures, and what does that mean to them as a bisexual Muslim and as a Muslim who isn't from America but does consume American media and does have opinions about Orientalism and sexuality. What say you, comrades? If either of you have things that you would like to say, you can respond to this video directly. Also, I am available to interview, so if you are ever interested in having a conversation that is less off the cuff and you want to help raise awareness about intersectionality and raising awareness towards trans struggles alongside the struggles of Muslims and other minority groups, marginalized groups, feel free to reach out and I would be more than happy to set something up. All of that being said, thank you for watching. If you like what I do, you can like, share, and subscribe. And leave a comment. Any little bit helps. And until next time, thanks for watching, and solidarity, comrades.